Righty. Well, I think that's been a couple minutes. Are we ready to go? All right. We've got about 40 people in here. I'm sure more will filter in, and then the recording will be available afterwards. So yeah, let's get this started. Let me just click this
Yeah,
next
speaking
block
of rage-fueled topics.
All right, so here we go. Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. I am Sebastian, your representative from the RevOps Co-op. We're partnering with Caliber Mind today on this roundtable event. What we'll be talking about is, among other things, why is the MQL not dead? And then how do you keep your leads alive? You know, we all have funnels, tools, people, processes, moving leads through our life cycles. And this is going to be where you learn how to make sure that that is a clean process that delivers the outcomes that you're looking for. We have been focused on sales ops a lot lately, so I'm excited to kind of totally lean over into marketing ops. And that's going to be our focus today. So let's start things off with an intro from our panel. One at a time, whoever is the most bravest, go first. Introduce yourself, a little bit on your background and why you're here.
My background is quiet at the moment. I'm Jess. If you hear banging when I'm not muted, I'm finishing up some flooring, so please don't mind it. Currently working with some fast growth early stage companies to help really set up their operations practice. My background has been in B2B tech between MarTech and infrastructure, helping really set up and drive revenue focused marketing teams. And such a huge component of that is the operational side. If your ops house isn't in order, nothing's going to work. So super excited to be here and talk about the value MQLs bring to the table and that they're not dead.
Nice. I'm Kamala Thompson, VP of Marketing for Caliber Mind, but I spent 15 years in operations in the tech space, spanning marketing, sales, and customer success. So very familiar with all the joys that funnels bring.
I'm also from Caliber Mind, Nick Zangri. I'm on the founding team, and I currently run our customer success and our revenue operations function. So, pretty much every day talking to customers about their funnels and their attribution models. Before that, running marketing ops teams, demand gen teams, and a Marketo consultant for many years. So excited about the topic today.
And I'm Drew. I've been doing marketing ops and rev ops for the last 7-ish years on the agency side. Before that, I spent a lot of time in both B2B sales and B2B marketing, with my marketing time being kind of all over the place, events, strategy, partnerships, digital, and a lot of analysis and data. So my love language is data personally. So.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, thank you all for introducing yourself. Quick reminder for the just general population in here for the format of the event. So we're starting with this portion, which is roundtable discussion. We've got some marketing and funnel related questions that the panelists will go through, and we'll kind of let the conversation go in the direction that it goes. If you have questions or comments, put them in the comment section. But for those longer discussional points, we will be shifting into a breakout room about halfway through the event. So you'll have your chance to kind of jump into a room, share your side of things and get one-on-one feedback, in front of the group. So those two rooms, room number 1 will be, you've never set up funnel reporting, or you're on your first attempt. Maybe this is your first role in marketing operations, or you're working with some new technology, you're kind of in the 101, 102 realm. Room 2 is for people that have set these things up before. Maybe they're dealing with a funnel that doesn't have the proper attribution, or they're going through a redo because of a change in priorities. So those are the folks with more established practices that are looking to improve them. Cool. So without further ado, we can jump into it. Have a starter question for the group. Which is, what makes an MQL, how should we measure them, and why are they important?
I'll jump in since there's silence. I'm gonna answer this in the most consultant way possible. When it comes to what is an MQL, it depends. I mean, really, it depends. Yes, exactly. It depends. I mean, I talked to a lot of clients. The most important thing is this. An MQL is going to vary based on every individual organization. You need to define what an MQL is for your organization. And once you define what that MQL is for your organization, you have to stick to it. The worst thing you can possibly do is change that definition or have that definition kind of bounce around, because as soon as you are inconsistent in the way that you define an MQL, you cannot report on MQLs. It falls down completely. So from my perspective, and having talked with hundreds of companies about MQLs, you have to set your definition and then be consistent with it. I quite frankly don't care what your definition is. I mean, I do, but I'm not going to fight you on that too much if I'm your consultant. What I am going to fight you for, though, is consistency, because the worst thing you can do is not have a consistent definition. It kills your reporting. It'll just destroy it.
And I couldn't agree more on being consistent, because inconsistency breeds infighting, whether it's intentional or not. If marketers put in a bunch of leads that inside sales doesn't perceive as qualified, everybody's going to lose their mind. I think where I would get a little bit more specific is I would recommend that smaller organizations keep their definitions as basic as possible. Barking.
You want me to tag in? All right, sure. So let's take a quick step back. And I think the question might have been even higher level. What is an MQL? Why do I care? So let's start there as well. So an MQL is often defined as a person that has reached a certain level of engagement with your company and is also a fit to buy your product. So that's kind of an aspirational definition. As you get more sophisticated, you might be using even machine learning to do some of this. You might not even work in leads and you work in contacts. And then I guess it's more of an MQC, I guess you could say. MQL is kind of the legacy back when everybody just used leads in Salesforce. But anyway, it's like one of the earlier stages in the funnel to show people that fit, they could buy your product and they're engaged. To Kimla's recommendation, maybe a very simple definition, you might just start with, do they have a campaign response? If yes, we're going to call them an MQL. And maybe that's your MQL definition for the first year. Once you get a little more sophisticated, you can layer on things like ideal customer fit and other factors to filter your MQLs. It's basically, you have all these prospects coming in the funnel, and MQL is supposed to be the quality control metric to know that it's ready to go to sales. So that's why you should care.
And sorry, are you?
No, I'm done.
Okay, I didn't want to step on your words. Just to jump back in from the dog barking, Nick pretty much said what I was going to say. We had a question about the MQA. I was going to save this joke for later, but I feel like the MQL is going through a rebranding. It's not dead, but we're kind of thinking of it a little bit differently. I hear a lot of companies going for automatically qualified lead because a lot of different things can trigger that conversion in addition to marketing activity. But I would encourage people to think a little differently about how they're routing their interested contacts to salespeople and how they're setting up their reporting. So for B2B businesses, it may make sense to look at account-based signals versus individuals multiple can come in on a single account versus how sales wants to hear about them, which is, I don't know a single salesperson who doesn't want to know about a form fill. It just may not be how the business thinks about reporting.
I think building on both of those, really making sure however you define it, there's alignment across different teams with it. So marketing's not defining MQL with something super loose that the sales reps go, well, MQL doesn't mean anything when it comes to me. So just making sure also there's alignment between teams so it means something to everyone across the board.
Yeah, and I think just kind of piggybacking on what Lydia mentioned in the comments is, from a sales perspective, having sat in a sales seat and had a quota that I had to hit every month, the worst thing marketing can do is not put yourself in the shoes and in the seat of that SDR or sales rep. Because if you don't, all you're going to do is send them work. And we don't want to send, as marketers, we don't want to send work. We want to send actual leads that the SDR or the sales rep might be interested in. So if you really want to make really good friends with your SDRs and your sales teams, put yourself in their shoes, put yourselves in their seat and say, would I be interested in this lead based on this definition? If so, you're probably in the clear. If the answer is, I mean, I wouldn't want to call them, but they can, then
Content
you're not acting
syndication.
as a good, we're passing all of our content syndication leads. No, we shouldn't. You're not being a good partner if you wouldn't want to call that lead. So be a good partner by putting yourself in their shoes, in their seat.
That's a good point. As a former SDR, I can say thank you for mentioning that, because I've been in that seat where, you know, there's a lot of leads and I'm like, okay, well, which one of these do you expect to be a client? And there's no answer. So we'll jump into the comments. There's kind of a three-part question from Jeremy, which is first, should an MQL be a Salesforce contact versus a lead? I think that's unique to Salesforce. You know, other systems, they won't kind of change the object, but I'm curious to get your feedback there. Should sales be made to approach all MQLs? And then at what point should marketing stop nurturing an MQL?
I'm gonna take the third question there because I feel very strongly about this one. At what point should marketing stop nurturing prospects that are live in a sales cycle with an AE? To me, again, coming at this from both a marketing and sales lens, if marketing is nurturing with relevant information that's appropriate for that person's stage in the funnel, marketing should never stop nurturing. Now, if you don't have the ability to segment based on the funnel stage, and you're just nurturing people the same way the whole way through, then yes, marketing should stop at once sales takes ownership. But in the ideal environment, the organizations that I've seen that do this the best, marketing has different types of content that they can send based on the stage in the journey that they are going to then continue that process. Oh, and by the way, that doesn't stop when they become a customer. Marketing should have content available for customer onboarding, customer success, and customer cross-sell and upsell. If you're not, as a marketer, you are missing opportunities to play a role in the entire revenue process.
100%. And I would take that a step further. Like, it depends on what your marketing team is focusing on. So for example, we have a podcast, and if people opt in to learning more about the episodes, that doesn't necessarily introduce any friction with the sales team. It depends on the type of content, the quality, and what kind of value you're offering. So I think, it just depends.
As someone in customer success, I'll 1000% agree with everything that's said. We, always strive for ways to engage our customers, and marketing is a critical part of that. So it kind of grinds my gears when I see, someone gets to a stage 2, they're opted out of email, marketing can't talk to them, they can't, invite them to their webinar. It's definitely a ongoing process. And real quick on the MQL is a contact versus a lead. Lead, kind of the history with the Salesforce platform, lead is kind of a really legacy remnant of how everything used to come in as a lead. As more and more companies embrace ABM, lead to account auto conversion, things like that, a lot of the people in your database are actually contacts these days, not always engaged contacts. So technically, like, if there's a qualification level, have a mechanism to mark them as qualified and count in your reporting as a marketing qualified lead even though they're technically a contact. That's my opinion on that.
All right. So there's a question for Kamala, but before I jump into that, there's been a lot in the comments of MQL, SQL, SAL. So kind of can someone on the panel help us trace through, what's the difference between a marketing qualified lead and a sales qualified lead in your experience? And then what's the difference between a sales qualified lead and a sales accepted lead? And kind of how do these rules and the processes, help move people along that road?
The way that I've seen this work really well, and I'm going to say that there's no right or wrong way here. It's just what works best for you. But the way I've seen this work really well is MQL is when marketing thinks a person is ready to speak to the SDR team or the sales team. SAL, sales accepted lead, is whoever's next in that thread, whether it's the SDR or the sales team, saying, I agree. I agree. I actually think this is somebody I want to work. That's it. That's all it is. It's them qualifying. It's just, they're not even qualifying anything. They're just saying, I don't think this is trash. It is a qualitative metric for marketing, but it's basically, this isn't trash. That's all it is. SQL is when the person says, when the sales team or the SDR team says, no, this is actually a good lead that we have an opportunity to sell to. So it's the next level of the qualitative metric. So MQL is nobody's looked at it yet. SAL is we've looked at it and think it's not trash. SQL is we can sell to this person. That's the most simple way of looking at it that, in my opinion, works really, really well. And I've seen it work really, really well.
That's a good one. I like that. It's almost an obvious definition. Marketing qualified lead, marketing thinks they're qualified. Sales accepted lead, sales agrees, and they decided to start selling. We don't have to overcomplicate it too much. The end result will be a complicated funnel buyer journey, but from our side, there's somebody that has never heard of us, marketing warms them up, sales decides if they're worthy of actual sales, and then they just move on down that funnel.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, so kicking it over to Kamala, there was a question about how you work podcast interactions into your funnel. And I think this is going to be relevant because more and more businesses are including, some thought leadership content in their marketing and sales practices. So how do you involve that at Caliber Mind?
So there's a few ways, and I'm lucky to have somebody like Nick on my team who can set this up to even work. But the simplest way, and the first way I'll talk about, is something anybody can do, which is to set up a referral campaign for the salespeople to use when they create an opportunity. So they say, hey, yeah, this was coming in from the podcast, so-and-so referred us. I go in, mark the primary campaign as the podcast referral, and we're good. Other ways are maybe putting a raw text form field on your form to see where people heard of you. But remember, human bias is an absolute thing, and they're going to just put in whatever they remember last, not necessarily where they heard about you. The third way that I feel so lucky I have the ability to do is we have web tracking enabled. So people who allow cookies, we're able to see what pages they're visiting on, and we have a navigation or a segment of our webpage that's dedicated to any pages related to the podcast. So we can actually work that into our funnel and attribution and see who's interacting with that content and be able to make a much better educated guess if we didn't have that web tracking enabled.
Yeah, I wrote a whole blog article on how to track podcasts, and it's funny because marketers have started doing podcasts, and it's as marketers have started doing podcasts and as organizations and businesses have started doing podcasts, most of the organizations that I see that do podcasts have started doing it without going through the marketing good practice of how are we going to track this thing? And they just started throwing podcasts out there, and then everybody all agreed that podcasts can't be tracked and it's dark funnel. When most people didn't actually sit down and say, hey, let's create a strategy to track this. Like to Kamala's point, like if you use good marketing best practices for other channels, you're going to have a landing page that's dedicated to podcasts. And you can track that using first-party data that somebody came there. And if there's some way for them to interact with that landing page, hey, by the way, here's an offer that we're giving to you as somebody that's coming from listening to our podcast. They fill out a form. Now you've captured that they actually filled out a form on that page to get access to that offer. So it's the same concepts that we use in every other marketing vehicle out there. It's just, you have to actually apply them for them to work. But most people don't. They've just been kind of, I'm going to use the word tricked a little bit by a lot of the very, very loud voices on LinkedIn that podcasts can't be tracked. And it's just not true. You can track them. There's a lot of ways to do it. It's not one way. It's what Kamala said. It's self-reported attribution. It's having landing pages with forms. It's having campaigns. It's all of those things put together give you multiple ways of tracking the impact of podcasts. It's not difficult. It's really not.
This is a passion topic for me. So just because it seems hard doesn't mean it's impossible and you shouldn't try. And number two is, getting heated here. The dark funnel isn't, there are some things we won't be able to track. Word of mouth. Podcasts are hard to track, but they're not impossible. There are a lot of ways to estimate it. And the goal in marketing is directionally accurate. It's not perfection. So if you can get directionally accurate, go for it. Don't not try because you heard that it can't be done.
That's a good one, Kamala. I was just writing that down. Directionally accurate. I'm saving that one for another conversation.
To Kamala's point on that, I just want to expand on that real quick. Like when we talk about reporting and how we use reporting, I never like to use the word caused or causation, which I think a lot of marketers are trying to go down this path of like, oh, well, a podcast caused this MQL or a podcast caused this opportunity. Stop using the word cause, because you're never going to get in the brain of a human being using data. You just won't. The only way to figure out what actually caused it is to ask them a question when you're on the phone call with them. Otherwise, you won't figure out what caused it. So directional is the goal. Causation is not the goal. You will never get causation.
Yeah, I might even add, like, there's a recency bias in the causation, right? You might ask someone why they took a demo and they don't remember the 58 touch points before the last one. They just remember that they ran into your salesperson at a conference or they subscribed to your podcast last week. So yeah, I totally agree with that. All right, so we are almost up to the blocks portion of the roundtable. And before we jump into that, since we are splitting into two rooms, I want to get that discussion going. So two questions before we break up. First is best advice for somebody building a marketing funnel from scratch. And second is best advice for somebody rebuilding a marketing funnel that's not working the way that it should be.
I would say don't be married for both of these. Don't be married to anything specific and really be open to the data maybe showing you different things. You may have an idea in your mind of exactly what your lead scoring criteria should be or your MQL criteria, but be open to what the data actually shows you, and that you might need to adjust things. Just don't get too tied to it, because consensus is good, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I always start that exercise by doing two things. Number one is I break out my one of my favorite tools on the planet, Lucidchart, and I flowchart out what I think the process actually is. Because a lot of times what you'll find is what you think the process is isn't actually what's happening, because somebody has changed something that you're not even aware of. So you have to start by outlining what the process actually is. And then once you've outlined what the process is, then you take the next step and you design what you want the process to be. And when you design what you want the process to be, we can't do that as marketers in a vacuum. we have to collaborate with the SDR team. We have to collaborate with the sales team. We have to collaborate with the customer team, the customer ops team, to understand how it should work. And if we get people to help design the process the way we want it to be, they're bought in now because they actually had a hand in designing it. So now they're bought in. So you're not going to have somebody that's like, well, I didn't have any input on this, so I'm not participating. I'm doing things the way I want to do them. Get the entire group to buy in. Once you have buy-in and everybody speaking the same language and using the same process, it's really easy to go build it into the tool. That becomes the easiest part. The most difficult part is getting everybody's input and getting the buy-in. So you have to include them from the get-go.
A couple things I'd love to add is B2B buying committees are like a bunch of toddlers on sugar. They jump in and out of the cycle all the time. So if you don't plan for people to leave your funnel and come back in, you start at a deficit. So make sure that your starting point is a point that you can recapture down the road and elevate to sales. Because if you don't build it so you can recycle, people are going to re-engage with your brand and you're going to miss it because you're not looking for those signals. So I highly recommend that you don't make the first bar or the first benchmark record created. No one can do that twice. Make sure that you're building it in a way that's sustainable and people can re-enter and exit it well.